I've been using Godot for almost 3 years now, and it is sweet. So I'm very good at overscoping projects. 2 of those big projects have been abandoned, but you know what? They are not regretted because a lot has been learned in the process. Many lessons were learned in the past year. Many cool people were met. I traveled to the Game Developers Conference in San Francisco. I went to GodotCon in Munich. I went to TwitchCon and met some game developers there. You might know them. So in this video, I'm going to go over some of the games I've made and some things I've learned from those experiences. Games I've made can be categorized into 4 categories. Let's start with the big projects. I love ancient Greece. I love the philosophy, I love the values, I love the history. When I conceptualized the idea of Hypatia, I wanted a world where I could talk to the famous people of ancient Greece. But since I was a new and excited game developer, that idea got distorted, and I started bloating the game and adding too many elements. Suddenly, it stopped making sense, and I couldn't fit the components together. From this project, I learned how to make fairly smart enemies. I gained a lot of knowledge on pixel art and top-down asset creation. I discovered the Godot plugin Dialogic for creating dialogue. I also learned the pitfalls of RPG game and animating, how a huge bottleneck is the art for doing all the animations, and how different approach can make life easier. I also learned that level design is very hard, and this realization pushed me into my next game idea. Lawcraft came about from 2 primary reasons. First was my disdain for level design, and second was I wanted to make a survival/base building top-down game. And how does one escape the horrors of level design? Procedural generation. You put all your level design worries into the hands of an algorithm, or so it seems. At first glance, the algorithm seems to be creating a compelling world. Once you zoom in and start playing, you realize over time the bottleneck it brings. 1. You must continuously tweak the algorithm in order to create fun biomes. And 2. You must add loads of content in order to have fun, like enemies, plant types, and then multiply all these items by the biomes you have. And 3. You must optimize all this. This project taught me a great deal. Trying to optimize the proc gen made me dig deep into tile map, and with the knowledge I was able to create a fairly successful tile map series. Procedural generation really pushes your engine to the edge, and this allowed me to identify the trigger points. I had a lot of fun working on Lawcraft, and carrying all this knowledge to the next project really allowed me to understand what the architecture should look like and where to focus on in the beginning. Which brings us to the present day. Nightword has carried over many elements of Lawcraft, though it focuses more on story. I'm using semi-procedural generation. When you play the story mode, you'll always get the same world, though not every block was placed by me. I love how the algorithm gives real-looking worlds, something that's difficult to achieve when placing tile by tile. Though, generating the whole world off the bat ended up being a bit too overwhelming for me, having so much space to fill up. So, although I will end up going this route, I found it much more productive to start off with tiny space and slowly building up. There's been many hardships when building this game, but nothing to cause a deadlock. Navigation regions were driving me nuts. But through the hard work of Smix8, the main maintainer of navigation regions, in Godot 4.3 it's now easier to merge these nav regions together, which was a huge bottleneck. And the reason was due to the survival building aspect. Every time a block is placed or removed, the nav mesh needs to be rebaked. This rebaking must be done on the main thread, and it's very expensive when you have huge open world. Being able to chunk the regions up saves a lot on performance. Though it needs a few more optimization, it's finally coming together and not spiking when I need to rebake. I'm also really happy the game has found a style due to the talented people who have helped contribute to the pixel art and also helped with writing the story. Nightword is a conglomeration of the experience of working on these past games, and even though I've worked on it for over a year, I've still not lost sight of the vision, and hopefully I'll be able to get a demo out by the end of the year. Surprisingly, these past 3 years with Godot, I haven't participated in many game jams. Until this year. I really like the Pirate Software Game Jam, because 2 weeks is a really nice time to work on a game. So I've participated in 2 Pirate Jams. And also, I'll consider the collaboration I did with Devlog Logan as a game jam. The 4 Godot devs make 4 games in 44 hours. So 3 in total. Game jams are a really nice way to complete and polish game. Let's look at my first game jam entry for 2024. The theme was It's Spreading, and I really wanted to get some experience in 3D. And I also wanted to try out viewports. While attending GodotCon, I watched a talk by Rafael Pica on viewports. I was so excited with the information presented in this talk, and I really wanted to try implementing 3D texture painting. It was really difficult to get this feature to work, but when something is difficult, it's always the best feeling when it's finally solved. Obviously, Aquila equinox was a huge inspiration for this project. Nature Spread is about restoring nature to a barren wasteland and completing simple goals to make the area a nice place for the boogdoties. And of course, I'm also super happy with the Blender practice I got. Although most of my projects have primarily been in 2D using pixel art as the art style, I love going into Blender and refreshing my knowledge, and of course I forget all the shortcuts, but it's also super fun and rewarding to get more and more experience. Now let's move on to my second entry for the Pirate Jam. This time there are two themes, shadows and alchemy. It was the first time I did a game jam in a team. I managed to get some super talented friends together. We had Stijn on the music. You might be familiar with some of his work. Miz was gonna help with the programming. You might have played some of his games. Snow was doing some of the pixel art. And Stijn also brought Melissa in to help with the level and game design. It was definitely a big change to have so many voices and to not be in complete control of a game, but that's obvious when working in a team. But all in all, I'm so happy with the game we ended up with. This game is a roguelike. You must survive 7 waves, avoiding light at all costs, and defeat the boss at the end to win. You have 1 health bar per run, and after each wave there are 2 elements to choose from that power up your bullets, which are represented as elements, for the alchemy side of the theme. If you die, you must start again. Also, it was so great working with Miz and seeing how he structures and works with code. I definitely brought some of that knowledge on to my main game, Nightword, especially moving away from inheritance and towards more of a compositional structure to the code. On to the last game jam I've done this year, Rogue Knight's Quest. This project was proposed by devlog Logan, an awesome creator. 4 devs are given 44 hours and the same game asset and are required to make a game. I watched the first episode of the series and I loved it, and was honored to be included with such talented people. I was also still interested in viewports, but this time I wanted 3D objects in a 2D game, like a rigid body 20-sided dice roll. And I was still off my high from playing Baldur's Gate 3. I wanted to do something similar, but in a 2D top-down world. I loved the little story I was able to create, and also to finally apply the rules of D&D in a game. And of course, it was so cool to see the different games the other guys were able to create. Alrighty, time to go over the little games I've made. So before I switched from Unity, I wanted to first try the Godot engine out. So I made one little platformer called Jumpity Doodah. It has climbing and dashing through enemies. Shortly after finishing that game, I wanted to make another. So I made a little horror game where you play as a plague doctor with a gun collecting materials. After that, I made Spider Stalk, a speed typing game where you play as a spider trying to make it to the top of a beanstalk. I also held a competition on stream, and the winner got to design a game for me to create in a week. Hence the creation of Raptor, a space shooting game that has waves of enemies and bullet upgrades. Later on in the year, I decided to make a mobile game called Pi Pong, which unfortunately is no longer on the App Store. Pi Pong has a paddle confined to a circle, and you go through waves of levels. Once you get to level 60, you get a coin, which can be used to get an extra life or saved up to buy different skins. Ads are not necessary, but give you coins or an extra life. The final little game I worked on, which I hope to one day expand, was a 3D first-person dungeon crawling game. This is one of my favorite genre video games. Finally, I bet you're wondering what research games are. This is when you're playing a super fun game and you get that feeling, I want to make it. I decided to call this category research because obviously I don't plan on expanding these games. It's just a little experiment, but I've learned a lot from them. First, I decided to give myself one stream to make Terraria, and in 6 hours, this is what I was able to create. Next, I tried out Darkest Dungeon, which was the first time I made a turn-based game, so I got to mess around with that logic. Kingdom 2 Crowns was a super interesting project. I tweaked a cool water shader I found online, and I think it's super interesting because of how complex the game is and how it's confined to one plane. It also gives a unique spin to the strategy genre. Honestly, I learned a lot from these little projects, and of course you can get important game development knowledge from playing games, but it's something different when you try to recreate them. I highly recommend. Lastly, I'd like to include some projects I've started with some friends that I hope will expand in the future. One is a turn-based mobile game with snow, where you have a base and explore different planets and collect different creatures. Don't worry, Nintendo, we won't use the Pokeball. And another is a 2.5D farming game I'm making with Snooies and Solar. Who knows if these games will get completed, but it's fun to work in a group and to motivate each other with cool implementations. Highly recommend. And by the way, if you're interested in learning game development through the Godot engine, I've actually just released a course on Udemy for beginners, no programming or game development experience required. I also stream on Twitch Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, so catch me there if you want to chat and watch me develop games. And if you want to try a demo of Nightword and access exclusive source code to some of my games, consider checking out the Patreon. Special thanks to all the amazing Patreon supporters. I will catch all you wonderful people next time. Stay rad and go make games.